Welcome back to our 12-hour live stream. My name is Joshua Stamper. I'm so excited to be here with you for our SEL segment brought to you by our good friends, EduMatch Publishing. And for those who don't know me, I am a proud member of the Teach Better team as the podcast network manager, assistant principal in the North Texas area, and the host of the Aspire podcast. And I have a special guest with me, Ray. I wasn't expecting you.
I know. I am really excited to actually bring on Mandy, who's going to be on this segment. But I thought, Josh, and I was really excited to do this with you because you and I haven't gotten to chat much, like where I can see your face. We were voxing yesterday.
Yes.
And I thought we could just take a deep breath from the last segment, reflect on not only the incredible 12 hours we've had, but then also kind of get into a little bit about what we've seen and where we're headed for this 12-hour. Can we take a break? And then we're going to bring Mandy in, and I know we're talking SEL.
I love it. I did need to take a little moment here just to kind of reflect because that last hour was on fire. I just love what Hedrick was talking about and Sheldon Akins. I'm just a huge fan of both of them. They're just amazing.
I know. I've really enjoyed the variety that we've seen in these 12 hours because we've seen half an hour segments and full hour segments. And I feel like at the end of every segment, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just learned so much. But then also, wait, we're done already? We're headed to the next segment.
For sure. Yeah, I've been frantically taking notes. For two reasons. One, for my own learning, but then also at the end of the day, we're going to recap as a group, both myself and you. And I can't wait for that conversation to kind of go through and really just digest all of the amazing things that have been going on all day today.
Okay, that's actually something I'm very stressed about. Can we talk about the last segment? I know we still have a number of hours. We're only 7 hours into 12 hours, guys. We got plenty of time.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the plan at the end? Are you going to be able to pinpoint the session you loved the most? If I asked you that right now, would you be able to identify that? That's the worst question they ask at the end.
I know. What I'm hoping is that everyone else will talk. And then at the end, I'll just mention whatever hasn't been because they all have been strong. So that's my plan. If Jeff or you ask me first, I know I'm in trouble.
I know. Well, now I feel like Jeff's moderating that one and we just get to sit back and watch him be the moderator and pick on him. And I'm worried that now that you've said that out loud, you will be the first one he's going to ask.
I'm probably getting messaged right now.
Because that's how the Teach Better family works. We are supportive. We want you to be successful. And then because we love you, we throw you under the bus every so often.
Well, since we have this time before Mandy jumps on, I just want to give some logistics real quick, if you don't mind, Ray.
Because this is really important.
Yes.
Okay, I'm ready. I feel like
this is a big announcement, right? Because I need to make sure, Jeff has told me multiple times, I got to direct them to the right spot. So I was going to do that. But before I do that, if you are new to this, right? If you're watching the segment throughout the whole time, if you have any questions, you have any comments, you hear that special word, better, use the comment section on whatever platform you're watching on and make sure that you are either giving green hearts or getting those questions in for myself or Mandy when we're talking about SEL. But the big announcement, right, is that after the segment, they got to go somewhere else, right? So where do they go?
Yeah, so here's the deal, guys. So it's comical because we're streaming right now, thankful to StreamYard, who's making this possible. We're streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. And we love that because we're able to kind of meet people where they're at and get to see everybody on their favorite social media platform. But some of these streaming platforms have limitations. So this is going to be the end of this stream, but we are not losing a second of time. We're going to enjoy a full hour, focus on SEL with the incredible Mandy Froehlich.
Yes.
And then we are going to end our stream here. You're going to refresh the Teach Better wherever you are, like the Teach Better Facebook page, the YouTube channel, on Twitter. If you're listening on Twitch, you're going to find the new stream. And we are going to be continuing our conversation with grading, assessment, and feedback with Dave Schmittou and Caitlin Giordano in our next segment starting at 4 o'clock Eastern. So as you know, Josh, and I know that you planned it this way because you're probably in cahoots with Katie Miglin, who's been making all this 12-hour possible, you saved the best for last. This is how we're wrapping up the first link for the first stream of our 12-hour, 7th hour information.
Well, it doesn't end any better than Mandy. I mean, she's just phenomenal. I can't wait to introduce her and talk with her about this important topic of social emotional learning. And then also EduMatch, there are sponsor for this hour. I love them so much. Sarah Thomas is doing amazing things with that company. And they've also given us some prizes that I get to give away this hour. So we'll do that throughout this segment, probably toward the middle or end. Oh, Mandy's
Love it.
Hi. How are you guys doing?
So
awesome.
good. I'm going to let you guys kick this off. I just stole your time for a little bit, Mandy, because I just had to preview how incredible you are. They're all warmed up now for your greatness.
They are. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I appreciate you more than I can put into words.
All right. Let's get into SEL, sponsored by EduMatch.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, Mandy.
Hi, how are you?
Wonderful. Well, I have the great pleasure of introducing you. You're an amazing leader, educator in person. I just love communicating with you all the time, especially with our, Voxer groups and messages. Mandy, if there's any viewers out there that may not know you, will you just take a moment to introduce yourself and share about all the amazing things that you're doing in the world of education?
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, my name is Mandy Froehlich, and that piece of it is so awkward to get into, isn't it? Like when somebody says, introduce yourself, you're like, do I start with my name? Because it's literally right there. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Anyway, I am an education consultant currently, but I was formerly an elementary educator, tech integrator, and director of innovation and technology. I retired right prior to the pandemic and had been consulting and doing the tech directorship for quite some time. And now I just consult full time and write books and work for EduMatch and all of those things. So that's kind of, educator, social emotional support's kind of my jam. And so I talk a lot about mental health and mental health issues and all of those kinds of things. So that's where I'm at.
Love it. And we're going to dive into that. So obviously this year has been extremely difficult for many educators, students, community members, and the focus has shifted to social emotional learning throughout the year for obvious reasons. But as we both know, SEL is not a new concept. The pandemic has really just highlighted that need on each campus. And so, to kind of start the conversation, maybe we can create a baseline. What are some practices that schools should have in place to serve the emotional needs of our students?
Well, I think that, from serving the emotional needs of our students, like districts are really all over the place, right? I don't feel like there's any standard as to what happens. And it reminds me a little bit of, back prior before there were ISTE standards. Yeah. Ed tech was a free for all. Like there was no set way as to do that. Even now, a lot of districts don't subscribe to the ISTE standards or follow anything like that. But it's a little bit more common than it had been. And I really feel like SEL is sort of like that. People don't really understand always what it is. I had an educator reach out to me at one point and he's like, SEL's no problem. He's like, all it is student engagement. And I'm like, no, it's not actually just student engagement. And so, but that's a really common belief. And, if we just engage students, they'll be fine. And that's not really, all of what SEL is. And so I think the first thing that districts really need to do, is first of all, understand, what SEL is. I know you just said, Josh, like set a baseline. And not where there's an administrator, somebody guessing that they know where it is, but that they actually put in the work to do the research, to bring in a consultant or bring in hire an SEL coordinator or something to that effect, where they very strategically create that baseline of what everybody needs to know. And I subscribe pretty heavily to the CASEL competencies. And so, if you are not familiar with that, CASEL, CASEL, it's an organization that has competencies based around SEL, similar again to like the ISTE standards. And if I had to put it in, if I really had to frame anything out for SEL, I would be all over the CASEL competencies, and they have tons of resources. And Andrew said, some just think it's a buzzword. Yeah. And to a point, a little bit it is, because the concept itself is so important that it should never be a buzzword. But right now, people feel like they're on top of it if they just say it. And, and so really understanding that we need to be behind our words. If you, whether it's a buzzword or not, that we're behind that buzzword and actually doing stuff to make sure that, that our students are feeling supported. And I don't think, Josh, that I actually answered your questions. You said, what should districts be doing right now? Well, one thing is they should be figuring out what SEL is.
Yeah.
And just, taking the time to, again, research, create kind of a foundation. And then, a lot of the things that we need to do for our students are the same things that we need to do for our teachers. Create an atmosphere where they feel like they belong. I truly believe that nobody can be happy in a school, organization, classroom if they don't feel like they belong. I don't think that'll ever work. And Eileen Whitaker does a lot of work around belonging, and she's amazing with that. And so I think creating those cultures of vulnerability, of empathy, of relationships first, of making sure that everyone feels like they belong. I think that those are probably where the district should start. It doesn't have to be an SEL program. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to go buy something in order to make SEL happen. You need to know what you're talking about, and you need to start with the basics, which is, relationship building and belonging. So those are sort of my, just getting started type things that districts could do.
Yeah. And so I think you made a good point there. Well, you made several. One, finding the expert and making sure that you have a good definition of what social emotional learning is, instead of just saying the term and just assuming that something's going to happen because of that term. But then the other piece is that it's not just for students, it's also for teachers, it's for educators. So, that question goes to, what can schools and district leaders do to support teachers' mental health?
Yeah, this one's really a tricky one, because there's quite a bit of supporting educators' mental health that really is on the educator. There's so much of mental health stuff that is rooted in educator self-awareness. And so a lot of the things that we can do for our students are sort of the same as what we can do for educators. One is educating them on what disengagement is. What is burnout actually? What is demoralization actually? And giving them the information that they need to not necessarily self-diagnose, but at least understand what they're dealing with. If potentially they feel like they're dealing with a little bit of burnout, that they understand that they may need to look at pulling back a little bit, creating some boundaries, doing those types of things. Whereas if they're dealing with demoralization, for example, that they're more likely to heal from that, from leaning in and creating their identity again. And so there are other reasons for educators' mental health to be impacted in their job besides burnout. What are those? And how do we even begin to start healing from something like that? So, that kind of the idea that information is power, right? Like we can, we need to be self-aware enough to know what to do with that information, and we need to have the information in order to grow from there. The other thing that I think it's important for districts to do is to really understand the amount of constant new implementations and new initiatives they have. I've been in districts where we've literally sat down and counted them out, and there's like 37 new implementations. Nobody can function like that.
No.
So the district needs to be responsible for what they're actually asking teachers to do. And so that kind of leads back to taking some things off their plates. Another really powerful and practical step that districts can take is to check their insurance plans. How well are mental health services covered? Are they covered at 100%? Do people know how to get help? And not the people in HR, because they're always like, oh, well, you just call this number and somebody on the phone will get you some support. You're like, what now? That number is nowhere on any of my stuff. But really checking in, like, how long does it take to get an appointment through your insurance? Is the insurance website always updated with providers that are covered? Just like there's little things like that. Because in the case of mental health specifically, if I'm depressed or I'm anxious enough that I want to see somebody and talk to them and go to counseling, that in itself is a barrier for me to get help. So if you make it, if the district makes it really difficult, if it's more than 3 steps, I am most likely not going to get through those 3 steps in order to get help. And so how can we really make the process for getting assistance as easy as humanly possible so they know what they can do?
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the end of this school year, because as we know, throughout the country, students are coming back into person for next school year too. That's most likely what most states are going to have, where kids are going to come back onto campus. And as we all know, that they've probably gone through a lot of different emotional traumas through that time of isolation, deaths in the family, loss of jobs, you name it. A lot of things are going on in the students' lives. So, what are some things that schools can do, like practical things, to help with that social emotional piece instead of just looking at maybe learning loss?
Yeah, learning loss. Hey, I'm struggling with that term, or like the gaps or things that people talk about, because I think that what it does is when we talk about learning loss, we are suggesting that teachers did not do the best that they could with what they were given. And I feel like it is, when we have had people go through what they have had in the past year, and whether we're talking about students or teachers, it doesn't matter. And then we get to the end of that and we're like, oh my gosh, hands in the air. Throw your hands in the air. I'm going to have to start all over again next year. And we've got 2.5 years to cover now. Like, that's not doing anybody any good. That is a recipe for disaster. Then we're already starting out next year with huge amounts of anxiety, for everybody, because all of a sudden we're behind and we have to catch up. And so the idea of learning loss, I think, is such a slap in the face to educators and everything that they've done over the last year and a half. I don't know the statistics on what students have learned in comparison to what they have learned in previous years. Frankly, I don't give a damn, because we were in a global pandemic. And so I think that what we actually need to do when we go back next year is we need to start to do all of the things that we missed over the pandemic. And what I mean by that is hug our kids. I'm so glad to see you. I haven't seen you in so long. It has been, by the time that we go back 18 months or whatever it's been, I've missed your faces. You belong here. I love you. We need to reestablish those relationships, which is what we were missing during the pandemic to begin with.
Yep.
And if we're creating those classrooms where relationships are a foundation, we are naturally going to hit a lot of the SEL requirements. If we go into the classroom and we're like, hey guys, you might have gotten dumber over the pandemic. So we're going to try working on that. Like, it's a no-win situation. You're not setting up the students for success because of, you're not focusing on relationships, you're not focusing on SEL. And honestly, I would think that going in, focusing on academics next year is going to it's going to make students so anxious that when you start talking about, some of the pieces of SEL with, self-regulation and things like that, it's going to make it a lot more difficult for students to self-regulate with all of that pressure. And so I think it's really important to go into next year, starting out with, kind of that idea of back to basics. What did you miss about your students when they were gone? Oh, the relationships, being able to talk to them, see them, look them in the eye. So do that. Don't worry about the learning loss. We will get there. there may be students who could have learned better in school. There's no doubt about that. But it doesn't make what we've done wrong. We did what was necessary, and we'll start and we'll move forward. But if we keep looking backwards, like keep looking in the rearview mirror. Somebody said to me the other day, somebody said, if you are in your car and you check the rearview mirror, you're going to keep driving forward. But if you're in your car and you stare at the rearview mirror and you never look forward, you're going to crash. Yep. And when we talk about learning loss, I feel like it's that same kind of analogy. So I guess the most practical thing I can say is, as we start to go into next year, think about, what did you need when you were in the pandemic? You needed like, even introverts are saying now, like, gosh, I certainly miss human connection a little bit, and what did you need? You needed human connection. Start with that. That's the most practical thing I can say. Yeah.
All right. So everyone that's viewing right now, let's give some green hearts to Mandy, because she's on fire right now. All right. So you talked about self-regulation, and I would love to talk about that, because, as we get students back into the building, that's going to be a whole new environment. There's going to be a lot more stresses in their life that they haven't seen for over a year. What are some strategies, not only for the students, but for the adults in the building, to help self-regulate?
So one of the things that I'm going to sort of start out with, and it's sort of a bummer thing to say, I feel like, but I'm gonna talk about it anyway, because I think it's really important to be able to look forward and to be a little bit proactive. One of the things that I can see happening as a potential happening for next year with educators is that as we go into the beginning of the school year and things start to feel just a little bit more normal, and because we're going into buildings, we're working with students, we're doing all those types of things. I'm fearful that at that point is when we're going to start seeing more sort of trauma behaviors in educators, potentially students too. But my focus is always educators, because I know everybody's focused on the students. So I try to make sure that I pay them special attention. And the reason that I say that is because I kind of, the best analogy I have is like an ambulance EMT, EMT worker. Okay. So, or an emergency room doctor. Like, we often hear this with both of those types of jobs. They go and they do their job, and something really sad and difficult happens, and they go home and they break down, right? Because their job mattered in the emergency. They did everything that they possibly could during that time. And in order to do that, you have to almost take a piece of yourself, like take a piece of your human, and sort of put it aside and be like, I have to take care of this right now, so you're just going to have to wait. And then when that human comes back, you have all the feels that you didn't feel when you were in the midst of the trauma. And I feel like in a lot of ways, educators are going to have been doing that for 18 months, which means when we go back to school and things look a little bit more normal and their human comes back, and the human's like, hey, that really stunk. Like, it was hard, and I'm sad, and I have PTSD now from it, and I need special attention. And then we're going to be in the beginning of a school year. And so the reason I bring this up is because I think in some ways, educator, mental health, and student SEL has become a huge bandwagon issue, right? Everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. They're like, yep, this is important because we had a pandemic, we're going to jump on. And I think it's awesome, the attention that it's gotten. But my fear is that when we get back to school, people are going to say, oh, but it's over now, so we're okay. When actually that's going to be the time that I think it's going to be the most critical for us to have supports in place for people who are going to be going through potential PTSD in order to get back to where they were. So that's one thing that I want to bring up, that I feel sometimes people look at me and they're like, well, that's not good news. No, it's not. But I really think that that's why it's so important that we get the supports in place.
Yes.
As far as the self-regulation goes, you know, one of the areas that I feel is really important in self-regulation is mindfulness and things like working on breathing exercises. And there's some things that you can do that really help a lot with self-regulation. One of the things that I think is true about mindfulness, because I'm like a certified mindfulness person, one of the things that I feel like is very true about mindfulness is that you have to be able to practice it in order to be able to teach it. And
yes.
that's not always true with everything. Like sometimes you can teach something that you're not super familiar with, but in this case, you have to be able to practice it first. And when I first started talking about mindfulness, my district, the district I was in was moving towards, like being trauma informed and things like that. And so we actually had a mindfulness coach in the district. And one of the things that a teacher said to me in the middle school, because the mindfulness coach worked in the elementary, the middle school teacher said to me, they keep telling me to teach my kids mindfulness, but I don't know what that is. Like, I don't even know where to start. I don't have the foggiest idea. And so it goes back a little bit to what are some practical things that we can do to help people out at the beginning of next year? Teach them stuff like that.
Yep.
It's and work them through, bring them through a workshop. Ask them to practice it themselves because it's going to help them as well. But being able to bring yourself back to the moment and be in that moment and be within yourself enough to be able to figure out your emotions is a really important part of self-regulation. So from the practical standpoint, because we can't always affect how self-aware people are, right? Like that's a huge part of it. We can't make somebody be self-aware, but we can give them the tools, and mindfulness is one of those tools.
Well, we also need to give them the time to practice it. And we also need to give them the space also.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think those are factors that are missed a lot of times. We'll teach and we'll provide that from someone that's an expert, but then we don't allow that opportunity for them to actually go and work on the mental health or mindfulness piece.
Yeah.
So,
and one of the things that I talk about a lot with districts, because I get the same, like I get a lot of the same questions, like, well, what can administration do? What can districts do? Because they want to be helpful. Like they really do. They just don't know how.
Yep.
And so I get that question a lot, and I'll say, have a half-day PD where people do it. If you want to do it in ed camp style, that's fine, but have it focused on things that would be SEL related. And I said, I often use, because I wanted this so bad and nobody ever taught me this. I always wanted to know how to make meals on a Sunday that lasted all week. How people package their meals on a Sunday, and then I never knew how to do that. That would have reduced my stress level so much, because I was teaching full time. I had 4 kids, and I was always getting some sort of degree. And so having somebody teach me something like that would have absolutely helped me out. It would have reduced my stress level. And so I'll say, have something like that. Have a mindfulness class. Yep. Have a yoga class. Have classes where we had in the one district I was in, we had this amazing I'm not going to be able to think of the word of it. It was like we called it wood shop when I was in high school. Like that kind of a facility. Yeah. We had an amazing one. Like teach teachers how to build something with their hands, and
industrial technology.
Yeah. Thank you. I could not come up with that.
It just popped in my head.
And so many times what people say to me is, well, really got to hit on literacy and math in every single PD we do. And I'm like, really? Do you? Like, who makes that rule? Do you really have to do that? At a time when we're talking about focusing on relationships, do you really need to take a 3-hour training to reteach them how to do math interventions? Is that actually a thing? And people can't answer that. People are always like, well, that's the way we've always done it.
Yep.
Fantastic reason to change it.
Exactly.
So, I think offering educators like you said, Josh, that time to really dig into the things that we're asking them to dig into that make us better humans and better educators. Like that's the thing we really need from districts.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, thinking outside the box, right? Talking about breathing exercises or meditation or, something that's not spoken of, but can do a lot of good with mental health. And I think you hit it on the head. And I want to talk about another thing that I've heard you speak about, Mandy, which is emotional tracking. And I'd love to discuss that more. And so for those who may not know what that is, will you just kind of share that piece and then how it can be used within the classroom?
Yeah. So I love emotion tracking, and I think it can be super powerful. And what emotion tracking is, and I have in my book, the Educator's Matchbook, I have an emotion tracker that goes through the entire book. What it is a very simple way to keep track of how you feel and why you feel that way. In the Educator's Matchbook, it simply uses like 5 different emojis. Like, so it doesn't need to be difficult. But if you're having a particularly bad day or something like that, you just make a note of why. And the idea is that you look for trends. So this would be if you deal with graphs, like if you ever teach graphs or anything like that to students, this is an awesome, very realistic way to take a look at something like that and to look at trends in their, it can be in their week, in their month, or in their year. And I'll give you an example of how this worked really well for a friend of mine. I just spoke with her the other day. She had started emotion tracking 2 years ago, and so prior to the pandemic. And she had called me a couple weeks ago, and she's like, I have been struggling so bad. Like, and she goes, and at first I was thinking, oh, it's the pandemic, and oh, my luck just hasn't been good lately, and all of the things. And she's like, but then I looked back at my emotion tracking for the last 2 years, and I realized always about this time, I have a really difficult time. She's like, so it must just be like March. Yep. And I kind of joke about, that somebody coined the term fart, between February and March when that's so hard. It's because it's the perfect sounding word for that time of the year. It just sounds disgusting, and it's usually kind of hard for people. But that realization helped her to be a little bit more proactive about how she was approaching her own mental health. And now next year, now that she noticed that, she will be able to, sort of be even more proactive than she had been this year in knowing that time, it's a possibility that she could be feeling really down. And so it's just a very simple thing that you can, if you have like a calendar, or if you have, any kind of, just a notebook, whatever, just write down how you're feeling every day, just one word or whatever it is. And then take a look at that, because it can really help you to figure out sort of where you're going typically.
Yeah. So Mandy, how do you feel about doing a giveaway real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got some awesome prizes from EduMatch. And so I want to give an opportunity for someone to win something. So I'm going to split this up. We've actually got 3 prizes. We'll do 2 now, and then we'll do 1 at the end, just to make Katie's job a little more difficult. But EduMatch has donated 2 copies of It's Me by our good friend Jeff Kubiak. And so I just wanted to ask those who are viewing us right now, for the first 2 people who share out what they're going to do for themselves this coming week are going to win a book from Jeff Kubiak. So I'm going to wait for just a moment and let those comments come in. But again, what are you going to do for yourself this upcoming week for your own mental health? We want to make sure that everybody is taking this time, especially during the, what'd you call it? Farch?
Yeah, during Farch.
Farch time. So make sure that you're getting those comments in. And then, of course, we'll let those know who won. And then, we'll... for all those winners, make sure that you're emailing Katie when we get to that point of who won. But I'm going to transition real quick to another question, which is, up your alley of technology, right?
Sure.
We talked about the term going back to normal, and that's being used often right now. And
Yeah.
that's also being associated with technology of going back to paper and pencil. And over the last, for sure, at least a year and a half, we have had to use technology extensively. So kind of where should we go from here in regards to technology? And is the technology use having an impact on the students' social emotional learning?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question, because I've had interesting conversations with districts who have said things like, our students have been on technology so much that our goal coming back is to never have them on technology. And I do get that it feels so one-sided, right? Right now, with all of the technology in place and how reliant we had been during the pandemic. But I also think that we need to go into this with moderation. And that's one thing we struggle to do in education, is to wrap our minds around what the moderate way to approach something would be. We're always on one side or the other. It's never in the middle. And I think that from the standpoint of, should we be using technology? We did amazing things over the course of the pandemic. Heck yeah, we should be using technology. Like, we just got everybody to where we were hoping that they would be. Like, they know how to use Chromebooks or what, whatever devices they were using. Teachers know how to get online. Like, they know how to get their students online and get them engaged. And they've worked really hard on this stuff. We should definitely not let it go. I really think that, I do a lot of work with districts right now in the area of blended learning, particularly the flex model of blended learning, and how the flex model takes all of the best things that we did during the pandemic and brings it into the classroom so you can focus on relationships. That's where our goal should be.
Yeah.
That being said, it's like absolutely technology impacts mental health. Right? Like, we can't deny that. There is too much, like I always say about even teacher disengagement, like, too much of anything is still too much working, even though you love it, is still too much, and so I think an important piece that we're going to have to be aware of and look at moving forward is making sure that students haven't developed some sort of addiction as they were expected to be online, and then also still keeping in contact with their friends via their phones and things like that. Like, just be aware of that kind of stuff. I used to do a lot of work with the high schoolers when I was a tech director. I would bring in the students and talk to them, show them their digital wellness piece on their phones, tell them to really look at it. What did the numbers mean? So we would talk a lot about that. And I would always have students come back to me and say, oh my gosh, I had no idea I was spending 10 hours on Instagram. and I had one girl come in and she said, I want to know how to set my limits. She's like, can you show me that? She said, I don't want to be one of those kids. And so we had a really good conversation about that. So making students aware of what those kind of things mean, just keeping our eyes out and eyes open for some addictions and things. It's also, the potential is also there that it went the other way, right? They got so sick of being on technology that they stopped using it as much. I feel like I've done that. I feel like I went through a period where I couldn't put it down, and now I'm going through a period where I don't want to pick it up. So it can go kind of both ways. But I think
technology fatigue.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, like, Zoom fatigue that took 3 months at the beginning of the pandemic, and everyone was sick of Zoom. But I think that, again, in moderation, right? Watching for red flags for any kind of obsessive behaviors around the technology, making sure that we continue to do the awesome things that we did that really engage students in the classroom, and we don't just throw everything away that we just learned to be true. I love that I hear some districts saying, we see and we recognize that online learning did work really well for some students. And so I used to, work with districts a lot prior to the pandemic on creating online charter schools, online programs. And I'm starting to get the calls now saying, hey, will you look at our online program that we have and make it an actual thing that can sustain itself? And so I love that I hear districts taking that into account, recognizing that we did have some students that worked really well that way. And we want to continue servicing them. So I think we have to look at it in moderation. Does it impact mental health? Absolutely, it does. We know that it impacts our mental health. I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day that she's like, oh my gosh, social media makes me feel so bad. She goes, I can't take like how sometimes I get so obsessed with looking for who liked my stuff. She goes, oh my God, I'm way too old for this. And so we know we do it. So of course the students are going through the same thing. So just being aware of those things and having those real conversations with students, I think is important.
And as adults, we have a fully functioned brain where a student is growing. And,
right.
There was a comment about, an 8-year-old daughter and their eyes hurting, and of course, you don't even think about that component of a child being on a screen for 8 hours. What is that going to cause, headaches, and are they going to be able to concentrate, due to that? So I know there's a lot of components there. And of course, like you said, it needs to be within moderation for technology. But at the same point, we shouldn't go backwards based on the gains that we've gone through through this pandemic. So real quick, I want to announce the winner. So I've got Van Scott as the winner, and then Teach_Teacher or Teacha. Those are the two winners. They were the first two. So you're going to win a book from Jeff Kubiak. Make sure that you are emailing Katie at teachbetter.com to announce that you were the winner of this giveaway. And we'll do one more at the very end for the last one, which is a course from EduMatch. And again, thank you to Sarah Thomas for sponsoring this 1-hour session with the amazing Mandy Froehlich. And Mandy, I know that you talked about, next year, but there's been a lot of loss, during this last year, and kind of fill in the blank as to where that loss may be. But what are some things that people can do to start that healing process?
Healing is super interesting because it's specific to everybody, right? I mean, how I heal from something may not be the same way that somebody else heals from something, which makes things like trauma so difficult to talk about because people get traumatized in different ways and they heal in different ways. One really important piece that I feel is true for most people is that you have to be able to know yourself well enough to be able to figure out how you're feeling. You need to be able to name the emotion. And that sounds really simple, but yet it's so powerful. So if you are sad, you are sad, and it's okay. It's okay to be sad. As long as you're not sad all the time, like it's a depression issue that you need to deal with. It's okay to sometimes be sad. I had a superintendent say to me that he had a few days in a row that had been really difficult during the pandemic. And he went into, he got home one night and went into the shower and cried for a half an hour. And he said, how do I not do that? I said, you absolutely do it. Like, that's what you do. That is your body's like natural way of processing through and letting go of emotions. Worse would be to not do that and box it up and hold it in and let it fester inside and really, make you feel worse over the long run. You have to be able to, acknowledge the emotions that you have. You need to be able to say, it's okay for me to have those emotions and to let go of the guilt that often comes along with working through all the feels. And then I would say that once, if you've gone through that process, I used to have a counselor that used to say, feel to heal. That was her thing. She would say, you have to feel it to heal it. You have to. If you bottle it up, it's not going to work. And sometimes that means, and Renewed Harmony said, normalize emotions, even the messy ones.
Yep.
Yes. Because, the ones we never want to deal with are the messy ones. They're the ones that make us cry I used to be so embarrassed that when I would get super angry, I would cry. Because it made me so mad, because I was like, no, I'm not actually sad. I am super angry about this.
Yeah.
Tears. And I had to get into a place where I'm like, okay, that's how my body reacts to being angry. It's okay. It still can feel a little embarrassing sometimes, but it's the way my body is processing that emotion, and that has to be all right. So I think as far as healing goes, you really have to be able to listen to your body. You have to be able to work through those emotions that are really difficult, even when it's not convenient. I saw somebody the other day say on Twitter, I feel like I'm to that place where I just can't anymore. I'm exhausted. I don't feel like I know how to go on with what's happening right now. And what I wanted to say to her, but it never works in the 260 characters or whatever you have. I wanted to say to her, then sleep. And I'm not being sarcastic. I'm being serious.
Yep.
Then sleep. And I don't care if you can fit it in anyway, because if you don't, you're going to continue to feel this way, and you're not processing through your overwhelm that you have right now. And in order to process through that, if you're tired, you have to sleep. That's all there is to it. And so sometimes part of healing is listening to your body, understanding what it needs, and then doing that no matter what. So I think, healings, I love talking about healing, because there's so much happening all the time. And I feel like we don't talk enough about how people can heal. Yep. We always talk about, well, we're just going to forget that. It reminds me of, have you ever heard the term where people say, just rub a little dirt on it to kids and they fall over and they get hurt?
I'm pretty sure my dad said that growing up. Yeah.
Right. But we do that to kids all the time.
Yeah.
We do that same thing. We say, stop crying. Don't feel frustrated. Don't be angry. Like we tell them, don't. And then as adults, what do we do? Same thing. Where we tell ourselves, don't be angry. Don't be sad. Rub a little dirt on it, and the emotional dirt or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we do some of those same things, and that just makes it more difficult to heal. But I do love talking about healing because of that, because it is the way that we have to go.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love it. You talked about sleep. I think, we use work and stress sometimes as a badge of honor, and we don't give ourselves the opportunity to just rest. And as educators, I think that's so important for mental health. And it's something that I think it often is forgotten. So I'm so glad, Mandy, that you brought that up. I want to do another giveaway real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also want to talk about your work toward the end, and, we're getting toward the end of our hour. I can't believe how fast it's been going, but for our second prize, we've got this amazing course from Sarah Thomas called Podcasting with Your PLN. And so as the podcast manager of the Teach Better team, I cannot go by this segment without saying, we're going to give the prize to the first person that says what is their favorite podcast on the Teach Better Podcast Network. So if you put that in the comment section, the first person to actually comment about that, what is your favorite podcast on the podcast network, you will get that course for free from Sarah Thomas and EduMatch, which is podcasting with your PLN. All right. So last piece, I know you have a lot of literature out there on two of the topics that we talked about, which was, the social emotional piece, but then also like the technology / innovation. So for those who may not have read any of your books, but they hear the amazing wisdom that you're providing here, what are those books and how can they get a hold of them?
Yeah, so all of my books are on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of those types of things. You can also find them on my website at www.divergentedu.com. Three of my books are on educator mental health. The Fire Within has kind of a compilation of stories from educators who have gone through various adversities and how they've used essentially what was their post-traumatic growth in classrooms with students to be better teachers. And so that's what the Fire Within is about. Reignite the Flames is sort of a shoot off of the Fire Within, except for that it's a lot more of the information that I've learned and researched since writing the Fire Within. And so Reignite the Flames is about educator engagement and how to be happier in our jobs, how to recognize some of our mental health issues, things like that. And then the Educator's Matchbook is a little bit different. The Educator's Matchbook is a really long, I think it's like 125 pages or something to that effect. It's sort of, it's a week by week guide to doing things that I talk about in Reignite the Flame. So it's kind of like a journal. It's got emotion tracking in it. It has, a gratitude journal in it. It's got mindfulness journal in it. It's got different reflective type questions in it. And then also within the pages, there's different mindfulness techniques and tools. There's gratitude, like information on practicing gratitude. All of it is geared towards educators, but it's definitely some of the gratitude and mindfulness and resilience techniques in it can be used with students as well. And so that is sort of what Educator's Matchbook is. And then Divergent EDU was launched second, but was actually my first book. So I wrote Divergent EDU and The Fire Within in tandem. And we launched The Fire Within first, and then we launched Divergent EDU. Divergent EDU is based on the hierarchy of needs of innovation and divergent thinking, which I had developed quite a while ago. And it basically is an organizational structure for supporting educators in innovative and divergent thinking. And of course, even then, I knew that if you have a disengaged educator, an educator who wants to leave education and isn't interested in being there anymore, if you have a lot of disengaged educators, it's going to impact your culture, which impacts, educators feeling like they can be innovative and divergent. And so that's what Divergent EDU is about. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the four main projects, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So Mandy, we've only got a couple minutes left. I think we're down to 7 minutes if I'm doing my math right. So want to leave on this. So for those who are looking to kind of enhance their social emotional learning, playbook, if you will, what is something they can do tomorrow or next week to really enhance that within their classroom, their school, or their district?
Sure. Well, the first thing, again, is I would recommend actually checking out CASEL because they have a ton of resources and everything from district level implementations to classroom resources and things like that. So I don't work for them. I've never even spoken to anybody there. So it's not an affiliation thing. It's just, I believe that much in their work. And so I highly recommend checking their stuff out. If I had to say something that you can start next week, I'll give you the sort of gratitude thing that I've been talking about lately. And it's a really easy way to start practicing gratitude in your classroom, which is a resilience strategy. Mm-hmm. So I would say what I've done if I go into classrooms and I work with students and take them through this practice is I'll tell them to come up with a gratitude, something that they're gratuitous for according to their 5 senses. And so they'll come up with 5 things. So like, for example, smell might be the smell of your mother's perfume or grandma's apple pie, or, something, maybe your dad was a mechanic. So the smell of cars being fixed or something like that, something that you feel gratitude for. And so you do it according to all 5 senses. And so a lot of people understand the idea of practicing gratitude. Like they understand that if you write 3 things down a day, that you're practicing gratitude, and it rewires your brain to be, so that the sort of foundation of what happens when you go through adversity is a little bit more positive. Like most people understand that. But what they don't understand is that you have to feel it. So they'll go through the emotions of writing it down, but you actually have to feel the gratitude. Like you have to internalize that process. And so when I tell students that I have them write 5 down and have them pick one, their favorite one that makes them the happiest ever. And then I'll tell them to feel it from their toes to their nose. And so I'll walk them through just some deep breathing to relax a little bit. And then I'll ask them to imagine like a white light or water or, something like that, starting at their toes, and that to remember that feeling of gratitude that they feel towards that thing. And it works from their toes, and I'll tell them it goes up their feet, their calves, and all the way up to their nose. And the best thing about this, that's so much fun as a teacher, is that if the students are truly doing it, they'll start to smile every time. They'll like, you'll see, especially the little ones. Secondary students are a little bit more
guarded.
Yeah, a little bit more guarded. They kind of keep it a little bit closer to themselves, but especially elementary students, they will start to smile, and it is so cute. But I tell them to make sure that they're feeling it from their toes to their nose. And as far as adults go, we need to do the same thing. So I think that that's something you could do in your classroom starting tomorrow. You could also do for yourself starting in the morning.
Yeah. And it really doesn't take that much time, right? I mean, in regards to the class time, that probably takes a couple minutes, and you can still get into the lesson and not feel like you're missing some of the curriculum. But it would be so important for the mental health of your students.
Yes.
All right. So Sandra, you were the winner of the course. So congratulations. And I again want to say that if you are the winner, the 3 winners from the segment, make sure that you are reaching out to Katie, and her email again is katie@teachbetter.com, and let her know that you were the winner of the EduMatch prize. And so again, what you won was a course from EduMatch, and they're just an amazing company. Mandy, you've published with EduMatch. I've got a book coming too, Aspire to Lead. I can't wait to have that come out with EduMatch. Fabulous company. Make sure that you're checking everything out. And you can find everything at edumatchpublishing.com. Mandy, you're just amazing. You really are.
Thank you.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. So if anyone is interested in asking Mandy a question, you can definitely drop it in the comment section for the last couple of minutes. And she can answer anything on social emotional learning, technology, innovation. Honestly, you can ask Mandy anything, and she is on top of it in the world of education. I can promise you that.
Well, I don't know if I'm on top of it, but I definitely have an opinion. That's for sure.
You're always bringing the fire. I know that much. So that's why we love having you on here. While these comments and things are coming in, or if you want to give some green hearts for Mandy, I got to, of course, bring up the fact that we are the last segment for this first part. So before we end, it's really important that you understand that this is the last event for this stream, but we're not done. The event is not done at all. It's going to continue with Dave and Caitlin, who I know are going to bring it for the next segment as they're talking about grading, assessment, and feedback, and you're not going to want to miss it. And I know there's some comments coming in right now. So again, if you have any questions for Mandy, please drop them in there. But Mandy, is there any last thoughts you have with like the last 60 seconds that we have together?
No, I don't think so. I just want to say that I hope that everybody is having a wonderful rest of the year. Please take some time for yourselves. It doesn't have to be a guilty thing. You absolutely necessitate it for going into next year. So I hope that you have, again, an amazing rest of your school year and a restful summer.